Hey, what's up guys? Michael Anthony here. Hope everyone's doing great. I haven't put a video out in a while. I put a hiking one out a few weeks ago, but we're in the dead of winter right now. It's like February 21st, 2021, and it's been kind of brutal. I've been out doing some hikes with my dog Hunter. In fact, there he is right there. What's up, buddy? What's up, buddy? Making a video. But anyway, we've been out doing some hikes, but I haven't been doing any hunting. Obviously, no fishing, anything like that. But I'm getting amped up for spring gobblers coming up. I'll be hitting Tennessee. I'll be hitting Pennsylvania, maybe Ohio, maybe West Virginia. I usually go up to Wisconsin every spring too, but I won't be up there this year. But I'll be getting plenty of turkey hunts in, and I'm really excited to get the new canoe out and get into some fishing. Definitely going to be targeting big flatheads. So spring is a great time to get into some of the big flatheads before they go on their beds during the spawn, which is usually around June and July here in Pennsylvania. So definitely going to be out targeting them. So I'll be putting out some videos then. Definitely looking forward to sharing it with everybody out there. So what I was thinking about doing today was I thought it would be a good time to share some of the strategies I use to target and plan and strategize for public land hunting, specifically archery hunting. A majority of my hunting is on public land. I love public land. I know some guys don't like public land at all. It's very challenging. It's definitely a different hunt than private land. I hunt private land too. I've had lots of success on private land. I have a hunting lease actually that I shot a nice buck on opening day of archery last year here in Pennsylvania. But I do hunt a lot of public land, and I've taken some nice big mature bucks on public land, and that's one of the most challenging ways to hunt, and it's also one of the most fulfilling, at least in my experience, and that's the way I like to hunt. So I was going to share some of the strategies I use and how I specifically plan to hunt a specific property, and I'm going to show you from start to finish. Now, I could probably talk for hours about how I plan and strategize to archery hunt big whitetails on public land, but I don't want this video to be too long, so I'm going to try to keep it fairly high level. This video will probably end up being long anyway, but I'll keep it high level and really just keep some solid pointers as to what I do and how I do it. And so I thought that might be a great way to share some insight with you. I don't claim to be an expert by any means, but I've had some great success taking big mature deer and just nice bucks in general on public land. And just to give you an idea, I'm here in my office and I got some turkey and deer and stuff like that. So here's some of my public land bucks. There's a nice big Wisconsin buck there. I took him in 2010, and he's a 10-point. He's a mainframe 9-point, but he's got a kicker that's an inch long on his brow tine, so I call him a 10-point. Now, all these turkeys you see I've taken on public land. These are all public land bucks here. Here's some, 2.5-year-old bucks, just decent bucks. But there's another big mature buck that I was really proud of. It was quite the adventure to get him, and it was on some pressured Pennsylvania public land that I took him. Just an old gnarly buck. Really happy with that one. I took him in 2019. It's funny because the only buck on the wall here that's not from public land is this little guy. And he was the first buck I ever got, which I took on the very first day I ever hunted, which was opening day of rifle season 1998. I didn't get into hunting until I was 18 because my father never hunted. He got me into fishing and the outdoors, and so I've always been an avid outdoorsman. As a little kid, I just always loved the outdoors, fishing, camping, hiking. So we did all that, but I didn't get introduced to hunting until I was 18. I had a friend invite me, and I always wanted to hunt, but nobody in my immediate family hunted. I had some relatives that lived out of state, but never offered to take me hunting, but it was something I always wanted to do. I read about it. I remember reading the hunter safety booklet that one of my uncles gave to me that he found. And I was like preparing at 12 years old, but nobody took me to get my hunter safety education. Nobody took me hunting. So I had a buddy ask me if I wanted to go hunting on opening day of rifle season here in Pennsylvania. And so I went out and bought some gear. I didn't have a lot of money. I bought a shotgun, the cheapest shotgun I could find. It was a Mossberg Model 88, and it just had open sights. It had one bead sight on the end of the barrel. It was a metal bead, and I bought slugs, and I shot it a couple times, and then opening day went out. I was up in this old rickety wooden tree stand on a farm that we had permission to hunt, and it was like a war zone. There was deer running off in the distance. I could hear rifles going off, opening of the hunt there. And within a couple hours, that 8-point came in courting a doe, and he was like 60 yards away, and I hit him on the third shot. And so I was just addicted ever since then. I taught myself how to archery hunt, how to turkey hunt. I started finding friends that were also into hunting, learned a lot from them. And I also learned a lot from my father-in-law. So my wife and I got together in 2009 or 2008 we met, and I started hunting with her dad in 2009, my father-in-law, and I've been hunting with him ever since. And he's up in Wisconsin. He has a camp, and we hunt strictly just public land. He only has 5 acres, and we hunt all public land up there. So ton of county land and state forests and stuff like that. But yeah, that's the story behind that little guy. So really fulfilling hunt. That's what got me started. That's what got me hooked into hunting. And yeah, so that's what I thought I would do. I've had some really good success on public land. I have some very specific strategies that I've put together in how I approach my hunt. So I'm going to start with, some of the basics, like getting my maps together, using the resources that are available online from state websites, Onyx Maps, Google Earth, and just how I start to look at those resources, those maps, and start to plan for a hunt. I think just about every piece of public property out there has big mature bucks on them. Whether people see them or not, that's a whole different story. And I've hunted properties where guys will say, there's no big bucks around here, there's no deer around here. And I'll get into areas and see, a dozen deer, see big mature bucks. I've seen some incredible monster bucks, 160 inch and over bucks that I just never had a shot at. In fact, I missed a monster. He was like a 12-point in Northeast PA in the mountains, using the strategies I use. And he actually busted me when I was drawing, and then he ran and stopped at like 25 yards, and I shot. My arrow deflected and went right over him and stuck into a stump. And that was one of the largest deer I've ever seen in person in the woods, and that was on public land in a very tough area to hunt, mountainous terrain. You don't see a lot of wildlife. So yeah, I'm just going to go over these strategies. I've honed them in, over the years. And, I have a lot of experience hunting these public lands. So maybe you'll be able to take some good insight from it. You could definitely use this on private land. I've used these techniques on private land as well and have had great success. So, yeah, thanks for joining me today. And let's go ahead and hop into it. I'm going to share my computer screen so you're not looking at my ugly mug. And I'm just going to kind of show you what I do on the computer to kind of get started. And this will probably be a multiple video series where I will actually go out and show you what I do in the woods when I start to scout and how I approach that as well. I don't know when the next video will come out for that, because I have a lot going on. I actually have some exciting news that I'm going to be sharing in the next couple of weeks here, but that's just a teaser. I'm not going to tell you what it's about, but it's outdoor related is all I could say. But in the meantime, I thought I'd put this video out there, and if it could help any of you, then that's great. If you have anything to share with me, any strategies you like to use, then leave a comment down in under the video, and enjoy. All right, folks. All right, thanks for joining me. We are now on a screen share, and I'm going to be recording here through the microphone and sharing my screen. So I'm going to try to keep this very high level, and I may kind of quickly move through it, especially the first part here, because I'm assuming that most of you who do any sort of due diligence on properties that you're going to hunt, you're obviously getting on the internet, looking for maps, and studying those maps, right? Coming up with a game plan before you even leave your house to go scout the property. So I'm going to kind of breeze through the first part, but then I will show you what I'm doing in the second part. So the first part of this strategizing is doing your due diligence. The internet has a wealth of great information and not so good information, but we're going to utilize everything we can. So one of the first things I'm going to do, and I already have a couple tabs open here, but one of the first things I'm going to do, depending on the state I'm hunting, I'm just going to go to their state website, the Game Commission website, the DCNR, whatever website has some public land information about hunting. So typically you can find maps. A lot of times they're going to be in PDFs, or they'll have a mapping tool such as Esri, which provides mapping solutions, which you could also use. So I'm just going to start here. You can see I already have it popping up because I've searched it up before. And I'm just going to come into the Pennsylvania State Game Lands here. And so what I'm going to do right now is I'm actually just going to randomly pick a property, one that I've actually never hunted, never been to. I'm just going to pick a random one over here in western Pennsylvania. In fact, I'm going to focus on southwest PA here. And as you can see, the PA Game Commission actually has this Esri tool. That's pretty good. It's actually really nice. It has some great features. Some states are going to have that, some may not. But this is a great way to kind of do some due diligence. You can learn how to use these tools. But what I'm just trying to do now is pull together some maps, identify an area I want to hunt. So let's just go ahead and say we're going to select this 179. I've hunted some of the properties in southwest PA, western PA. That's where a lot of my Pennsylvania public land hunting is. But I've actually never been down in this far southwest corner. So let's go ahead and take a look at this State Game Lands 179. It looks like it's actually split up into a couple chunks here. I'm not going to go into too much detail about this specific tool, but what I have identified is, okay, this looks like a good chunk of property down in southwest PA. It's State Game Lands 179. So what I'm going to go do is actually look for the actual PDFs of the maps, which I don't see it right here. Here we go, right here. So these PDFs are nice because you can save them, print them up, you can mark them up by taking notes on them, things like that, which I do tend to do. So I have pretty much hundreds of PDF printouts in my truck actually stowed away just from all the years of scouting and hunting different land. So I enjoy it, it's fun. But here's State Game Land 179, so here we go. We now have the PDF, and this is going to be great. It has the icons, it has the legend over here. The other nice thing about these PDFs, and some of them are going to have this, some of them are not, but there is some great detail on the second page here. And I noticed all of our game land maps in Pennsylvania typically have a blurb about the property. So just a couple things to point out right away as I kind of conduct this due diligence. I could see that it's almost 6,000 acres. Right, so those two big chunks are probably just shy of 3,000 acres each. I see that there's almost 11 miles of maintained administrative roads throughout the game land for public access. I can see there's 14 parking lots, and you kind of get the point. You read through this, and I'm just scanning it as I speak here. I can see that there's some farming in the area. Some of the private property surrounding this land is going to have corn, hay, maybe some soy, things like that. What else? So it looks like people do hunt this property for deer, turkey. Looks like it's being mentioned as a remote location. And I'm just quickly going through this, but you could find some pearls just by doing this type of research beforehand. Right? It only takes a few minutes to start reading through. You could take some notes. You can print this up, have it available. I do suggest printing it up. In fact, the technique I'm going to show you on the second part of this video on the second part of this series is that I typically mark it up in a very specific way, but I'm going to show you how I do that electronically as opposed to just doing it by hand. Now, another thing I notice here that really grabs my attention is that the topography is considered somewhat severe. Now, I like that. I like to hear that. You know why? Because the more severe, the more remote, the harder it is to navigate, the less hunters are going to want to spend time on it, the less hunters are going to want to traverse that property, right? They may stay pretty close to where they park. So I always look for descriptions on the terrain. I look at the slopes with the topographic lines. I'm looking at all sorts of stuff like that, right? Before I even get there to scout it in person. But this tells me right here, we got almost 6,000 acres. Some of it is severe. It's considered a remote location in Greene County. That's telling me a few things. Number one, there's going to be a lot of great spots on this property that other hunters are just not going to want to hike to or get to, right? Most of your fair weather hunters are not going to be hiking back there. And if guys are out of shape, then they're probably not going to even attempt it. They might be within a couple hundred yards of the parking lot, right? Your more hardcore hunters, the guys who are really putting in the time and effort to target, mature deer, or they really want to get away from the crowds, or they want to get off the beaten path, which is what I like to do, then you're going to have lots of great spots on a property like this that you can get completely by yourself, way back off the beaten path and not see another human. And there's a good chance that's where some of the mature deer are going to be, not to mention the fact that that's where wildlife's going to be in general, right? So even if you're not after a specific, size of buck, like you're not targeting mature bucks, but you're just targeting game in general, but you do like to kind of have an adventure and get off the beaten path, then you're going to have the same luck just by targeting this property in the manner in which I'm discussing here. So regardless if you're just looking for more wildlife, even turkey. I do these same concepts with turkey as well, and it works really well. I've killed turkeys back off remote parts of public land, a mile, 2 miles back by foot, back in spots where I've never seen a human or even a sign of a human. And, it's always loaded with deer and turkey and other sorts of wildlife. So that's one of the underlying concepts is we're going where other hunters will not go. We're going where other hunters are not willing to go. And that's typically where wild game is going to be. When they get pressured, they're just naturally going to shift their movements, right? Or they go nocturnal. So you might still have those big bucks showing their sign close to the parking areas, right on the main trails, stuff like that. But guess what? They're probably hitting those at night for the most part. You could always get lucky and run into one during the day or in the morning or evening, but a lot of times those areas that are pressured, that do have human scent, that have a lot of human pressure, hikers, whatever, they're going to be going through those areas at night. They still visit them, right? They'll still be there. You'll still probably see deer just in general, but we're targeting mature big bucks, and I have some specific strategies I like to use to do that. So once you pull your map, study it, right? Get a good understanding as to what the layout of this property is. All these parking areas, right? They can be extremely helpful just to understand. You're starting to develop an awareness of how this property is laid out. Ultimately, you're going to have to get there on foot to really study it. But what I do is I save this, I print it up. I may even print a couple copies just in case one gets wet, or I forget one in the truck, or one blows away, or something like that. There's always something happening. So we're already learning about this property just by studying some of these maps, right? Now, another couple things I love to use is Onyx Maps. So I had just pulled this up before I started recording the video. Like I said, I've never been to this property. I've never hunted it. I think I've heard of 179, but I've never actually been to it. So this is all new to me, and this is the same process I would follow if I wasn't even recording this. But another thing I like to do is I go onto Onyx Maps. I print this up as well. So there's a print feature here. I actually print this up because I want to see some of these landowners that surround the property. Because there's a couple things you can uncover just by seeing some of these landowners. First, you can get an idea what the property lines look like. You're able to maybe get an idea if they're farms, if they're owned by private individuals or businesses or coal companies, stuff like that. You can learn a lot just by understanding that. And there may be opportunities for you to maybe even get permission to either hunt those properties or use their properties to access the public land, which you're more likely to get permission from a landowner to maybe utilize his property to access the public land than you are to maybe get a yes at archery hunting his property. But again, it never hurts to ask. It depends on where you're at, and it really just depends on how popular deer hunting is in that part of the country, right? So I know in Pennsylvania, you can go around and ask to goose hunt and turkey hunt and dove hunt from private landowners all day and maybe, get a thumbs up. But when it comes to deer hunting, people are pretty hardcore about their deer hunting, and they already have people hunting these properties usually, or they're hunting it themselves, or family members or the neighbors are all in it together. But you may be able to discover some good insight just by either talking to some of these people, just knowing their names, just knowing if this is a person that owns the property or a business. So I will save this too. This gives you some great insight. There's some good detail here that you're not going to see on the PDF. I'll close that one. On these PDFs, right? The Onyx image is beautiful. It's got that transparency so you can really take a look at the topo lines. You can see the trails. And then we go from there. Another thing you could do is just take a look at the Google Earth. It's always nice to look at Google Earth. Again, you can do the street view if it's available. And again, that's going to depend on how remote it is. As you can see, none of these roads are available street view, so I can't even do street view. But you can use this good detailed Earth image to zoom in and out, right, and pick up on small fields. These look like gas wells, right? Now, the problem is we don't have the property lines marked here on Google Earth, but Google Earth can come in very handy. You can go to 3D and really get a feel for the ridges and valleys, so you can see some big ridges here, these big bowls, valleys, saddles, right, fringe areas. See some of these little openings here, trails. So there's all sorts of great detail you can get out of this. And sometimes I print this up too. I'll just do a screen print using this snipping tool. You could just drag it like this. You could print it up, you could save it, whatever you need to do. So that's kind of the first part. Now, one other thing I'm going to mention, and I'm thinking a lot of you folks already do this, is another part of your due diligence should be just doing a search about this particular land on Google. And so I will do this real quick, but I don't want to spend too much time talking about it because I'm assuming that you guys are doing this for the most part. So if I came into State Game Land 179 PA and just did a search for that, this could be pretty insightful. And one of the reasons is because you may find articles, if you scroll down far enough, articles about what's going on in that area in or around the property. I could see something here about gas wells, leases on the state game lands. So that's probably some of those gas wells we saw on the Google Earth image. Another thing you'll tend to find, and it just depends on the public land itself, is there's a lot of forums out there, a lot of outdoor forums, hunting forums. I don't get involved with the forums, but I will browse at them because a lot of times people are coming into these forums and saying, hey guys, I'm from Pennsylvania and I'm looking to hunt maybe State Game Land 179 or something like that. And you can go through and read these forums, and sometimes they'll be old. They might be from 10 years ago, but you might get some more insight. The other funny thing is too, I tend to find a lot of negative Nancys out there. They'll say things like, that property sucks and I never see deer there and things like that. And then I go and hunt them and I see lots of wildlife. So I think just about all properties have great potential unless you're really dealing with a highly pressured small piece of property, like let's say a 50-acre piece of public land that's gotten tons of pressure. Maybe it's near a big city, something like that. Again, those deer might just be using it in the evenings. They're probably on private land the rest of the time, not getting pressured. But if you got 6,000 acres and it's in a pretty remote part of the county, I can guarantee you there are some trophy bucks out there that humans don't see. They don't see them at all. These bucks get big by knowing their environment and being cautious and using all their senses. They're experts at becoming ghost, these big boys, especially when they get up there 3.5 or older. They literally become ghost. So you really need to match your wits with them and get on the same playing field. And it's tough and it's fun, but that's all part of the challenge. So again, I don't see any forums popping up right away, but if you spend some time just scrolling through some of the results, you might find some additional insight that may help you, it may not. I also tell people just take everything you hear in a forum with a grain of salt. You never know, the perspective at which that person's looking at that land. So don't let it sway you from looking at the property if you have a bunch of guys saying that that property's terrible or whatever. I usually don't even really listen to that stuff, but it's good to read just to get a little bit more of a perspective as to what exists on the internet, at least, to help you with your research. All right, so I'm going to hop out of there, but that would kind of conclude the first part. Due diligence, research, internet. If you really want to get wild and crazy, you can call up the local game commission officer. You can call the local DCNR office and just ask them questions about that particular land. A lot of times those people will be really happy to tell you about it. And I've actually done that in the past, and I've had some really good success. So don't be afraid to shoot an email, give a call. You could be doing all this research in the off season, right? We have many months of preparation that you could really start to hone in and get to know a piece of property and learn as much as you can about it. You may get a really great piece of advice from somebody like a local game commission officer, a local game biologist, by just tracking them down, calling them up, asking them a question, which I think is more effective than just emailing. But you could always email too, and they might get back to you, they might not. But anyway, okay, part two. Part two is where we're going to start to strategize and break this property down. It's one of my favorite parts of the process because I've had so much good success with it, and I really approach it from a strategic standpoint. That way, when I get out there to the land in person, then I'm going to have some specific key areas that I'm going to focus on. And if everything aligns, then we won't have to waste too much time diving into areas or parts of this property that may not be as productive as others. And so I'm going to show you how I determine that, how I break it down, right? It works for me. Maybe it'll work for you as well. Okay, so the first part, and usually this is the part I do by hand. I usually don't do this electronically. I'm taking these maps, I'm taking this image, and I'm actually printing it up and then marking it up with my hand, but I'm going to try to do this electronically, which works just as well. I just don't usually do it this way, and show you exactly how I break this property down and strategically approach it for a successful scouting mission by foot. So the first thing I'm going to do is, so I'm assuming I'm going to be printing this up, so let me just take a snapshot of this. So I'm going to use this image here, and I'm actually going to edit this image with one of the paint programs here on my computer. You could do this electronically just like this if you like. Again, I like to print this up and do it by hand. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to move to 2D shapes. I'm going to use circles. First, I'm going to break this property down based on assumed pressure. I call them pressure zones. And based on the information I have available, in order to flush out potential highly productive areas, which tend to be more remote areas, but they're not always more remote. You may have a highly productive area that's very much overlooked, that's not far from where you're going to park, but it may be tough to get to, it may be impossible to get to, and that's part of the challenge and the fun with public land. So we're going to try to strategize. It's like putting a war plan together, right? We're going to try to figure out how to approach this property, put the best strategy together in order to scout this out on foot and locate some high impact stand sites. So the first order of business, what I like to do is I'm going to cross-reference this image with this one here, because this one has all my parking areas marked out already. So you could even use these maps, which I tend to do, but because we're doing this electronically, I want to be able to see that nice detail on OnX maps. Now, just for the heck of it, I'm going to focus just on one section of this, because we already know that this total property is almost 6,000 acres. That is a ton. So just one of these is going to be close to 3,000 acres. And that's going to have plenty of stand locations for us to, determine. So just going to zoom in on this and focus on this section here. I'm just doing this intuitively. That's the only reason I chose this top piece. Whatever your instincts tell you. All right, so I can see all the parking areas here. I'm going to pop this screen out here so I can quickly jump back and forth. So I'm just going to quickly go through. Hold on, let me move over to my screenshot here. So I'm going to go back and forth between these. What I'm going to do is I just want to quickly mark these parking areas just so I have them marked. So I could see one here, two there. So the first thing I'm going to do is just kind of come in with the brush. I'm going to use this blue here, so I know there's a parking area. There's a parking area somewhere right up in here. And there's two down in here. I'm just going to take a quick peek. So there's one up that way and then one down by the bend there. So looks like there's one up here somewhere. And there's one somewhere around here. It doesn't have to be exact. We're just going to use these indicators. So again, these are going to be our parking areas. There's two here. So okay, now I have a good visual on my OnX Maps printout here of where the parking areas are. So why am I marking the parking areas? Well, the number one reason is because guess what? A big majority of your hunters are going to park in the parking areas. Now, we don't know a whole lot about this land. We weren't able to use the Google Street View to look at the roads. So these parking areas might be, for the most part, the only spots to park. Now, I'm going to assume there's going to be pull-offs on these roads that run through the property that will have additional parking opportunities. Areas where you can just kind of pull off the road into some grass or on the dirt. There may even be other parking areas that are just not marked on the map. So I just want to get a good sense as to where people could potentially park to access it, because, again, that's going to be where a large majority of your pressure is. Now, I don't necessarily avoid these parking areas. Depending on how the scouting trip goes and where my stand locations are and how I'm going to access those stand locations will determine ultimately where I park. And sometimes it's in these parking areas, sometimes it's not. It depends on what's available as well. Sometimes these properties will have restrictions on where you park, or if the terrain's very steep or there's guardrails or things like that, that may limit where you park as well. So again, I haven't been there in person yet, so we're just going to go based off what we know electronically in eyeballing these maps. Now, why did I mark those? Again, because that's where some of the hunting pressure is going to be. So I'm going to now do one of my favorite parts of this process that I developed in determining where I assume most of the pressure zones are going to be. I call a pressure zone basically an area where a majority of the hunters are probably going to be, because your fair weather hunters, a lot of them are going to follow the same patterns. They're going to park in a legitimate parking area or a pull-off or something, right? Somewhere that's easy to park. They're going to walk in usually on an easy-to-access trail like this one here. And they're not going to go too far. They might go a quarter mile at the most. And I'm just talking, a fair majority of the hunters. Not everybody, obviously, but a fair majority of them, your fair weather guys, the ones that are just looking to get in the woods, the ones that are just not real serious about trying to, maybe they want to shoot a big monster buck, but they're not as hardcore as we are, right? So they're probably going to only go in a few hundred yards at most, maybe get off the trail a bit, not that deep, put a stand up in an area that looks good, right? We're taking it to a whole other level than that. So one of the things we're going to do is we're going to try to do what other hunters do not do. because that's where your big boys are definitely going to be. They're going to go to those areas where other hunters are not going. They may visit these areas where the hunters are setting up their stands near scrapes and rubs and deer trails and all this stuff that looks exciting, but those big bucks are probably only going to be there at night. So we want to be able to have an opportunity to take a shot at them when it's still light out. So we're going to mark our pressure zones. Now I know from the scale down here, looks like maybe that might be about 1 inch or whatever. Doesn't have to be exact. That's 2,000 feet, which is a good scale to use because a half a mile is going to be a little over 2,500 feet, right? So 2,000 is going to be just under a half a mile. So most guys, they're going to stay within a half a mile of where they park for sure. And the steeper the property, the tougher it is. If there's not really good trails, they're going to be even less than that. So what I'm going to do is just try to draw some circles based on the scale and what I know about this terrain, which a lot of it's steep. And I'm just going to kind of encircle the areas here, right? Like this would definitely be a pressure zone. Hunters, this is definitely where hunters are going to be within these areas here, right? Now this gets pretty steep on some of these ridges back here, so some of them might not even really hike back into those ridges. But what I'm going to do is just go near the parking areas and just kind of put these circles that kind of align with the scale, right? Maybe about 2,000 feet at a max, because I just don't think people are going to be going even that deep. But we'll give them the benefit of the doubt. And I'm just going to kind of draw these. So I'm just going to quickly go through the rest of this as to how I'm generalizing pressured areas based on parking areas and trails and roads. So just kind of bear with me as I hop through it, and you can kind of see what I'm doing here. So I don't see a parking area marked here, but there's definitely a trail that comes in, loops all the way around, real long trail here. But I'm going to assume somebody could potentially park here, so we'll just make one of our spots right there like that. And maybe even up in here. I'm also just going to kind of put it, there's a couple roads passing through here. It doesn't show any parking areas, but I'm just going to consider that potential area to park. Now you can get as detailed as you want with this, and I do sometimes depending on the, where I'm hunting, what I'm going to be doing. You can really start to break this down in very specific manner. But again, I wanted to keep this high level. I sometimes do go much more detailed, meaning I will color code, use different colored Sharpie markers and notes and things like that as I kind of break a property down. Again, it just depends. And I use my intuition and my instincts a lot too. So a lot of this is analysis, trying to use, what I know about deer and my understanding of hunting public land and some of my prior successes. But I'm also using instincts, intuition, woodsmanship, especially when I get out there on foot. I could see a road here. There looks like there's some trails that probably could be accessed. You might have to park here and walk all the way down depending on what this road's like, but there is a good possibility there is some sort of pull off there, and I'm just assuming that. So let's go ahead and just kind of encircle that as well. Now there's this road too. This could very well have some parking in it, so maybe I'll mark that one as well. Just kind of give it a little circle here. Now you can kind of get the idea. So I'd obviously spend a little more time like really analyzing this, really studying the topographic lines, because I know this is some steep, severe terrain, and so I might take my time like really breaking this down. But the whole purpose is that I'm going to assume that when archery season comes around, there's going to be guys parked in these parking areas, and a majority of them are probably going to be somewhere within these circles. And that, again, that's just the generalization based on kind of your fair weather standard hunter that is just going in less than a half mile, a couple 100 yards, looking for some sign, and then throwing up some stands. That's the type of assumption I'm making. Now, a lot of the areas I hunt on public land, they don't even get a ton of pressure during archery. A lot of the pressure comes right around the rut and rifle gets hammered, but I'm not assuming that every one of these circles are going to have a hunter in them. But I like to kind of generalize in this way, because just in case there is a bunch of hunters that come out and these parking lots are loaded, I'm going to assume a majority of these circles are going to have hunters within them. So the next part is fun, because this is where we start to target specific areas, and a lot of times they're going to be the hard to get areas, the areas that are just going to be really tough to navigate. They may not have trails, but guess what? Your highly pressured deer are going to be there. Your big bucks will probably be hiding in there because they're seeing less humans. A lot of times there's going to be severe terrain or thick stuff, right? And it just could be very powerful to check these areas out. So what I do is I want to go in and choose at least 2 or 3, even more, that are going to be some key focus areas for me to target when I go there by foot. So what I'm going to do is continue drawing circles. So I'm going to come in here and just kind of put a circle down in here. Turn this a little bit. I'm going to change the color of it too, make it green. So now we got our green zones, right? So maybe come in here, nice green zone right in there. Some good green zone in here. And I'm just kind of doing this quick again, so nothing's really exact here. Green zone in here. I'll even put one right down here. Now there is a road coming in this way. There's some private land here. But depending on this terrain, you could see it drops from 1,500. It's going down to 1,300 over here. So it looks like there's a valley maybe right there. This could be at the top of the ridge. But anyways, it looks like that drops down. So this might be pretty steep. There might not even be anywhere to park right here. So I'm just going to put a small one in here too. So now what I've done, very quickly, very high level, is targeted 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 specific areas that I would assume that most people are not going to be in. Number one, a lot of these spots are far from the parking area, right? To go from that parking area along this trail just to get into this vicinity, you're looking at, maybe just shy of a mile, maybe 2/3 of a mile or something like that to go down. And then once you get in here, you're not going to probably hunt right off this trail, right? You're going to be scouting these ridges, these valleys. You might be getting close to some of the private land over here. You can get really remote up in here, but it's going to be a heck of a hike to get there. But you know what? That might be your golden opportunity to put a buck of a lifetime down, a public land monster, just see more wildlife in general. Even up in this area, so there's a trail coming in this way, but one thing I notice about this, look how it doglegs multiple times, because this is steep stuff. Most guys, even if they park here, they're probably not going to hike all the way up to the top here. So even once they get up here, this would be a heck of a hike, even though it doesn't look that far, right? It's not really that far, but all these dog legs, you might be at a mile right there. So again, this could be a hot spot, and I may even put a circle there, right? Again, that's if I'm really digging down and taking my time here. I'd be looking at all these little areas like that. So right here, just in this section, I'm just liking the way this feels already. I have a parking area here, one here, even one up here. I know this is some steep terrain, so there's going to be some nice valleys, ridges. There's going to be some nice saddles. There are trails going back, so I could get back there quietly. It's going to be a pretty good hike. In fact, this one's going to be uphill. So these are the type of areas nobody's going to be, especially if you get back here and get off that trail. Boom, you're going to be remote back in here. So I'm kind of analyzing these areas that I don't consider to be pressured, or hoping doesn't receive a lot of pressure, just based on kind of my electronic analysis here. But look how much we've done just, you know, in the last 20 minutes here. If you weren't listening to me and you just kind of printed this up and really broke it down, studied the topo lines, understood the area, understood where the parking was, the roads, understood the terrain, you could flush out some potential spots to scout very quickly. In less than 10 minutes you could do this. Now again, I do this by hand, so obviously I could do it much quicker if I'm not talking and trying to explain it at the same time. But this is my technique I use. This is how I've gotten on some of those big public land bucks I've showed you, and it's worked really well. And it's been a lot of fun too, because it's like strategizing a war plan, right? You against the beast of this earth. So it's just a cool way to break down some public land property. So at this point, all I'm going to say is, you know, the next step would be getting out there and scouting it by foot. Everything you've done here may completely fall apart once you get out there. You might learn things that were completely different than you expected, or there was way more parking areas that haven't been marked, or the land has completely changed because of oil and gas drilling, or whatever. It could be any number of things. But most of the time when I get out there, things only change a little bit. These key target areas here, they still usually remain the same. And so I'll end up just picking a few and I start to scout them by foot. And then once I get back there, if I'm feeling good and I'm seeing the sign I need to see, then I start considering stand locations, and more importantly, how to get to those stands quietly, scent free, and utilizing the wind. And the problem is you're not always going to have perfect stand locations, perfect wind directions, perfect entrance and exit trails. So you may have to do a little bit of work for that, but you could figure it out. And it's good to have different stands for different wind directions. And you definitely don't want to be hunting stands that you put up for a west wind when there's an east wind, right? So you should have west wind, east wind, north, south. You should have that covered. And with all these different spots, you could certainly get multiple stand locations in this area and still not even cover the whole thing, right? Remember, this is going to be around 3,000 acres. So you got plenty to work with here. You may end up putting, you know, 4 stands right in this area, because this is a big area. I mean, from here to there, it's probably about a mile. And from here up to there is, you know, maybe another mile. So you got a square mile there. There's going to be a lot of deer in that area. There's going to be a lot of land, a lot of terrain, a lot of deer trails. You're going to find a lot of sign. So the key is using your woodsmanship once you get there, understanding what the deer want, how they move, where's the fringe areas, where's the bedding, what are they feeding on, and how can you get in there without busting yourself, right? Getting busted and have an opportunity at a nice big buck. So that would be the next part of the video, is to get out there on foot, which I would like to do. I'd like to actually take this and keep it and print it up and actually go in and start scouting these just to show you what I do once I get on foot. Because for me, a lot of it comes down to instincts and intuition and using my woodsmanship once I get there in person. But this is a great way to kind of strategize and get some guidance as to how you're going to approach this property before you even get there. And so hopefully you found some insight on this. Another thing you could do is really spend time breaking this down, looking at where food plots are, marking them, where's the power lines, you know, here's a power line here, where's the pipelines, and marking them. And the more you do that, the more detail you add, the more insight you're going to draw from it, right? You may find that you have a great spot back in here, and coming in on this pipeline is the best way to do it. And you can get permission from this landowner to come in here and park and do it, right? There's just so many variables that could play into how you end up hunting this property. So marking, you know, water, marking streams and creeks, you know, you could see the creeks and the valleys here, ponds, lakes, and utilizing them to your advantage. So you can get very detailed with this, which I do sometimes. I'm not going to do it here because I've already been talking your ear off, but hopefully this is giving you some cool clues as to how I target public land deer, and maybe you'll be able to get on some mature bucks using some of the same techniques. So I'm going to stop there for now. I'm going to save this, and then I'm going to aim at getting another video out where I actually come out and scout this. I'm just not sure when exactly I'm going to be able to do that, because I got a lot going on, but
hope you liked the video, and hopefully this is a good winter video since I haven't been out and about doing any outdoor activities at the moment. But let me know what you think, and best of luck to everyone out there. All right, I'll see you.